Welcome to another coffee break with Catsurveys. I'd like to welcome Kanesh Dattani, who's a support manager at Mates in Mind, to this episode. Catsurveys have been a supporter of Mates in Mind since 2019. We have found that the resources and tools offered to us by Mates in Mind have been priceless when prioritising the mental health and wellbeing of our team. Kanesh, starting out, would you give us an introduction into Mates in Mind?
Hi, Jodie. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, so Mates in Mind, we were established in 2016 by the Health and Construction Leadership Group with the support of British Safety Council. And the reason why we are in the space that we are is, of course, mental health has for a long time been neglected by a lot of organisations. Our understanding of mental health has, of course, changed as well over the last few years. And we really want to support the construction sector and the other sectors alongside construction in ensuring that their workers are being looked after. At the moment, we work with over 450 organisations. A lot of them are in construction, and really what we want to do with them is give them a better understanding on their mental health, on their own mental health, personally speaking, and also on the organizational level, giving those companies the resources, the interventions, the infrastructure to ensure that mental health is prioritized, whether that's in their offices or on site.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us some statistics on mental health within the construction industry?
One thing that I wanted to address as well, with mental health, of course, a lot of the time it's labeled the invisible killer. If you break your leg, for example, you might wear a cast. And with mental health, you can't tell if someone is going through poor mental health or not. So often it is overlooked. And that's why some of these stats might catch you by surprise. To start off with, in England and Wales, this was a survey done in 2019. Over 5,600 people had taken their own lives, which is around 15 people a day. Out of those 5,600 plus, construction workers were 3.7 times more likely to take their own life than the average population. With construction, there are a lot of factors that play a big part into that. As we all know, there is a huge cultural divide between how men deal with mental health and, of course, how women deal with it. Culturally, men are told to brush it off the shoulders and get on with it effectively. It's something that's a little bit taboo. It's massively stigmatized, and unfortunately that does mean that mental health kind of gets neglected. Along with that, construction work is mentally and physically taxing. A lot of the time it's long hours, especially for laborers on the ground. For management as well, they have strict deadlines. They're working with huge budgets and machines that should you get injured, it could mean that you're out of work. I think the biggest thing is the culture, whilst it's starting to change, since we started in 2016 to where we are now, we're seeing more and more organizations do more about it. They are starting to look at mental health. They are building frameworks around their mental health, as you've experienced with Catsurveys. But we want to make sure that they do have those right resources, and we can help support building that program up. Another stat is, regardless of industry, regardless of sector, the 1 in 3 people at work at any given moment are suffering from poor mental health. So anecdotally, we know that only a small percentage will reach out for professional help. I think it's a human habit that if we are going through stress, we are overwhelmed with our mental health. I know the first person I talk to is either my mum or my girlfriend, and it's very, very human. A lot of the time, it's completely ignored at work. It's not something that's spoken about. Once again, going back to that stigma, a lot of the time there's this view where it's a burden on people. You don't want to burden people with your mental health, or you might be scared to be perceived as weak, or that it's a weakness. And a lot of the times, unfortunately, when there is a lack of understanding of poor mental health, it is seen as a weakness. Once again, with the program, what we want to do is make sure that organizations have a really good understanding of that. It's not a weakness. It is just like that broken leg. It does have an impact on your work, and it is something that you can also get better from. It's something that you can heal from as well, and something that workplaces can manage. I think that's another thing that's really, really important.
I've experienced it before, where if I've got a headache and I couldn't work, I wouldn't feel bad for calling in sick and saying, I've got a headache, I can't work today, I'm really sorry. But if I'm having a bad mental health day, suddenly I might feel guilty for calling in sick, or that it's not an actual reason. Whereas luckily at Catsurveys, That has happened to me before. I have had a mental health day, and when I called in sick, that it was met with the same attitude as it would if I had called in having a headache. It was just take the day, hopefully I get
Yeah.
back to it soon, even though I know and you know that mental health struggles are perfectly valid and no one should feel that they're burdening anyone.
It's interesting you say that actually, because the business side of poor mental health, and when it is neglected or it isn't being effectively managed, it's estimated that between 60 and 90% of employees, they will give a different reason for absences when it is related to stress or poor mental health. But the influence an organisation can make when they have a proactive approach can change that. It's great that at Catsurveys you have an employer there that does understand that. Unfortunately, it's not the case in a lot of workplaces, especially within the construction sector. There is still a lot more work to be done. But going away from the stats as well, I did want to touch on something that we did with our team earlier this year. So we were given the privilege to work alongside a family who unfortunately did have their father, their husband, their son take their own lives. And like we mentioned these numbers earlier on, and we're looking at it, and me and you, Jodie, we know that they are important. They're hard to swallow numbers, but when you actually hear a story of someone that is mourning a death of a friend, the dad, their son, their partner, it just becomes a lot more stark and real. And the reason why I mentioned that is, when I started this role as well, the reason I wanted to be a support manager with Mates in Mind was, of course, we all know how important mental health is. We know that virtue is something that needs to be looked at. It only set in how important work around mental health is when you do hear a story. And Chris's story is one that we have shared with our organisations and on our social media channels. It's something that I do urge any listeners or viewers to watch. We'd love to help you and support you if that video has made an impact, if it does make you want to get involved with Mates in Mind.
So going from that as well, how are Mates in Mind helping smaller organisations and SMEs?
One way we do help SMEs is we make sure that the program is accessible to them at a lower price point. We want to make sure that whilst a lot of organisations higher up in those tier one construction organisations, of course, do have more resource personnel that can specialise in mental health, for example. So we are always looking at improving what we can do for those self-employed and businesses that have 50 employees or less. So we do want to make sure that it's accessible to them. But the other thing that we've done this year with SMEs, we had a survey. Again, this was research around those SMEs, around those self-employed workers and micro businesses, which hopefully in the years to come will continue the development of our resources and delivery. As I mentioned before, they might not have a specialized team or a large HR team or a health and safety team that can put their focus towards mental health without upskilling or training or educating.
Obviously, we've used the resources that are available. I know resources and tools come out around specific awareness days. We've used those at Catsurveys and found that they've been really helpful because the information that you're sharing, you want to get it right. Having everything available from yourselves to be able to share with our employees and then show that we understand that mental health and wellbeing is important, it has definitely made a difference at Catsurveys.
And we are really glad to hear that. A lot of our resources, they do apply to most organizations, and our supporters have access to a portal on our website that has a lot of resources like posters, like toolbox talks. It has training like Start the Conversation, which is our general awareness program. On the other hand, we do also work with organizations to find out a little bit more about what are the areas that they want to address, what are the areas that they could do with more support with. Is there any work that we can bespoke for them? So we do help in that identification process, almost providing a gap analysis with our assessment. And that sort of helps organizations get a good understanding in brief of what their journey is, where they are on the maturity matrix and where they can get to. One thing we do urge organizations to do is also benchmark their progress, because this isn't something that can be fixed overnight. It does take patience, it does take educating the workforce.
And what is in the pipeline for Mates in Mind in the future?
So at the start of next year, we are launching a stress management program. So the idea behind this is to optimize our program even further. It's something that we will make available to our supporters. It will give organizations a good understanding on how to prevent and manage, stress in the workplace. Firstly, what processes are in place to sort of identify and mitigate stress. The stress management program looks at your current resources, where you are currently, and gives you that bespoke understanding of your own organization and the stresses that workers face, and also helps you mitigate those stresses as well. Whilst organizations, of course, always have the best intentions for their staff, they want to make sure that they want to help them and support them in any way they can. It is about ensuring and optimizing their understanding on what they can do to help that. And that's where we come in. There are a lot of parts of the program that will benefit everyone, but it is really about those that are engaged with us on a regular basis that make the biggest impact.
Well, thank you very much, Kanesh, for all the information. Thank you for your time, and I'm sure I'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you for having me on, Jodie. It's been a pleasure.